The Brown County Historical Commission and Brownwood's Lyric Theater, in cooperation with the Brown County Museum and the R.B. Rogers House and Events Venue, present Bygone Brown. Episode 11, The Iron Horse. The first generation of pioneers who settled Brown County largely personified the ideals espoused by Thomas Jefferson, who foresaw the success of the American experiment as resting on the backs and the back-breaking labor of citizen farmers. The author of the Declaration of Independence and third President of the United States had imagined yeoman farmers, able to subsist on their own, to be the cornerstones of the Republic. And after Jefferson's Louisiana Purchase in 1803 practically doubled the total acreage of the U.S., his ideal of men who earned their living from the sweat of their brows spurred generations onto the frontier. But while most of the men impelled by this ideal would survive, they could not prosper until their own capacity for industry could be matched by the innovations of the Industrial Revolution. Although rudimentary applications of steam power had existed as far back as the 1st century AD, Scottish inventor James Watt is credited with turning the steam engine into the literal engine of industrialization. In 1776, the year of America's Declaration of Independence, Watt introduced the first commercially successful reciprocating steam-powered engine, an innovation so transformative that the International System of Units named its measure of power the watt, after him. Though initially used to pump bilge water out of coal mines, the steam engine quickly became the means for powering ships, with the first paddle steamer introduced in 1783 in France, and the first steamships plying the Atlantic Ocean from 1813. Recognizing that what could be accomplished on water could equally be achieved on land if steam engines could be made small enough, the city of Liverpool, England, organized a competition, offering the then princely sum of £500 sterling to the contestant whose engine could pull a carriage over a 1-mile section of track at a speed of at least 10 miles an hour. And in October 1829, during the contest known as the Rainhill Trials, George Stephenson's rocket achieved both victory and infamy.
But really, Mr. Huskisson, you should rest. You must give your kidneys time to recover from the surgery.
Nonsense, nurse. I feel fine. Besides, with the PM coming, I have to be present. How would it appear if the Member of Parliament for Liverpool were not present?
All right, shake his hand if you must. He'll know you have been here. But then I insist, back to bed.
Yes, of course. There's his carriage now.
An engine is approaching. Take care, gentlemen.
Prime Minister, my Lord Duke, Your Grace.
In his eagerness to greet the Duke of Wellington, the man who had defeated Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo and who was then British Prime Minister, William Huskisson, Member of Parliament for Liverpool, failed to stop, look, and listen, and was run over by Stephenson's train. It mangled his leg, and unable to get a tourniquet applied properly or have the damaged limb amputated, Huskisson bled to death later that day. Ironically, the death of an MP brought the contest in Liverpool more notoriety than it likely would have achieved as simply a horse race with a rich purse, the public suddenly being made aware of both the danger and the allure of a future that would follow behind the iron horse. With Stephenson's victory, the Liverpool-Manchester Railroad became the first intercity railway in the world, and the world rushed to copy its example. Early attempts to encourage the development of railroads in Texas, however, were met with suspicion. In 1836, for instance, the first Congress of the Republic of Texas organized a railroad navigation and banking company with the encouragement of both Sam Houston and Stephen F. Austin. But neither it nor three subsequently chartered companies ever laid a foot of track. In fact, it would not be until after Texas had become the 28th state that a 20-mile section would finally be completed. The Harrisburg to Stafford leg of the Buffalo Bayou, Brazos, and Colorado Railway Company in September 1853. The funds necessary to construct a railroad were scarce, further exacerbating public suspicion by making the construction of the rails dependent on Eastern money. Although various state laws prohibited cities and counties from issuing bonds to finance public works, the state did possess one resource of almost infinite value. So valuable, in fact, that it had been the old republic's and the new state's favorite means of rewarding public service: land grants. Between just before the start of the Civil War till just after the end of Reconstruction, the state seesawed between authorizing and prohibiting the award of 16 sections of land for every mile of track until 1882, when the practice ceased altogether. By that time, as much as 35 million acres of land had been given to encourage the construction of railroads, an enticement that won the state approximately 2,500 miles of track. Unfortunately, though, those miles did not come anywhere close to Brown County.
And y'all expecting me just give y'all my land?
Well, think of how extending the line from Temple will aid the development of the county.
All I can think of is it'd aid bankers like you, Mr. Smith, and merchants like Mr. Weekly here.
But surely development benefits all of us.
Not me. I like things just the way they is. Putting a railroad through the middle of my place, it'll just ruin my peace and quiet.
At the beginning of the 1880s, the closest railheads to Brownwood were in Temple, Waco, Round Rock, and Fort Worth. Although people could travel by stagecoach, the goods they wanted came to Brownwood by wagon, drawn by oxen, horses, or mules. The ox teams took the southern route, there being good grazing along the way, while horse and mule teams ran east, where good feed was sold along the route. With so few residents in the county in those days, and the overwhelming majority of them being subsistence farmers, the wagon trains leaving Brownwood usually left empty as local residents had nothing to sell, and they returned loaded with goods and merchandise that was more expensive than it would have been in a better connected locale. So when in 1882 the legislature ended the generous incentives it had used to attract the big rail companies to Texas, the isolation of Brown County looked complete as the withdrawal of land grants made every decision to extend rail service into a nakedly commercial one. And when bankers Brooks Smith and Henry Ford and hardware merchant Joe Weekly heard a rumor that the Santa Fe Railroad was thinking of expanding, the men traveled to Galveston, knowing they would face a tough set of conditions to persuade company officials to run a line through Brownwood.
So in addition to a depot and yard space, what you're saying is it's going to be
$25,000 up front.
for a rural community such as ours, that sure is a lot of money.
Mr. Weekly, it's because yours is a rural community that we have to demand it. Mr. Smith, I'm sure you understand.
Yeah, I do. If someone came into my bank asking for a loan, I'd want to know the same thing you're thinking. How's this going to make any money?
Brooks Smith was 23 years old when he came to Brownwood in 1876, and he became its first banker by accident. Though he would own numerous businesses throughout his long life, his first was a modest dry goods store which happened to have a strongbox. Farmers and ranchers quickly began entrusting small sums to the garrulous young man for safekeeping. A year after his arrival, he opened the county's first bank and quickly became the town's biggest promoter. Convinced that they could meet the demands of the railroad bosses, Smith, Weekly, and Ford returned from Galveston and immediately set about persuading Brown County residents to contribute land and money to attract the trains.
So tell me, right now, how do you get your produce to market?
Market? We can't hardly grow enough to feed ourselves. Y'all talking about trains when I can't afford no seeds. Them damn Yankees took away my workers, and it won't rain.
That's why we need the trains, you see.
You gonna loan me the money for the seeds?
All right, yes.
So you can get rich.
Wrong. So we can get rich together. The trains will bring us lower prices for the inputs we need and higher prices for our outputs. That'll make our land more valuable, and it'll attract investors, new businesses, workers. Stay isolated like we are, and we stay poor. Get that train in here and everywhere around us, Brady, Ballinger, San Saba, Eastland, everybody'll come to Brownwood.
Well, all right, Mr. Smith. You convinced me. I'll give you that easement. Now, what about the rain?
I'm working on that too.
Incredibly, within only 2 months, Smith, Ford, and Weekly had secured the rights of way and raised $6,000 more than the railroad company had required. Construction of the line began in 1884. And then on December 1st, 1885, with the appropriate fanfare and Smith and his partners and their investors on hand to welcome it in, a steam locomotive from the Santa Fe pulled into Brownwood, making it the westernmost terminal on the line. Passenger and freight service began in February of 1886, and with Brown County suddenly connected, there followed a decade of incredible growth. When Smith and Weekly had arrived in the mid-1870s, Brownwood itself may have had as few as 120 residents, with only 2 dry goods stores, 2 saloons, 2 hotels, and a 2-story courthouse. By 1880, the population had increased to a still modest 725 inhabitants. But by 1890, the number had tripled to 2,176, and by 1900, it would reach just shy of 4,000. Businesses too followed that growth, so that by the mid-80s, the town had 9 general stores, 5 saloons, steam-powered cotton and grist mills, and even an opera house. A second line, the Fort Worth and Rio Grande Railway, later known as the Frisco, would arrive in 1891, linking Brownwood to Fort Worth and coinciding with the end of the cattle drives and the coronation of King Cotton. In 1870, only 2 farms in Brown County were planted with cotton, and no bells were ginned. By 1900, however, the number of farms growing cotton had increased to 1,396, and the number of bales ginned to 24,154. After generations of barely scraping by, the sod busters were suddenly getting rich. The coming of the railroad not only enriched the counties it linked together, of course, it made millions for the railroad companies themselves. And in 1888, the then State Attorney General, James Hogg, sued railroad magnate and robber baron Jay Gould of New York, alleging that his interest in the state violated its 1876 Constitution, which required that all railroad companies operating in Texas be chartered by the state. From the attention he gained from winning his case, Hogg won the governorship, becoming the first native Texan to occupy that office, and in 1890 he established the state's most powerful regulatory agency, the Railroad Commission, to ensure that men like Gould would never exert that kind of influence again. While Big Jim Hogg was holding the railroad companies to account in Austin, in Brownwood, another Big Jim, Dr. James Abney, was busily trying to get them to expand. Born in Mississippi in 1846, Abney had come to Texas as a child, and he moved to Brown County in 1895, his wife owning 2,000 acres of ranch land in Blanket. He opened the first hospital here soon thereafter and acquired more land, a 10,000-acre spread in Concho County and a large tract on the Colorado River in southwest Brown County. And in Brownwood, he met and befriended its irrepressible promoter, Brooks Smith.
Goats and sheep, but mostly goats.
Goats.
Well, cattle used to walk to market, through here and then up the Western Trail. Longhorns, not because they gave the best meat, but because they were the best travelers. Now, we send good quality beef cattle back east via rail.
And now you want to do the same with goats.
Well, I never heard of a goat drive to Kansas, have you? We get that line extended to Brady, we'll open up new markets for meat, milk products, and wool.
Now you plan to convince the Frisco to do that.
Well, Dr. Abney, that's where I thought you and I ought to make a trip to Fort Worth.
In 1902, the delegation from Brownwood persuaded the Frisco Railroad to extend its line to Brady, with 2 additional stops in what, at the time, were open grassland on their own ranches. Anticipating the kind of growth that Bangs had experienced because the train had stopped there, Smith and Abney each subdivided the affected parts of their land into commercial and residential zones, but rather than name the whistle stop on his property after himself, Abney offered to name it after the president of the Frisco, B.L. Winchell. So in 1903, the stockmen of McCulloch County got a new rail depot and a new way to get their stock to market. And one stop away, a new town was born, called Winchell, instead of Abney. Brooks Smith, after his efforts on behalf of sheep and goats, next turned his attention to cotton. He invested a lot of his own money to charter the Brownwood North and South Railroad Company in 1910 for building another new extension from Brownwood to Cisco via May. Unfortunately for Smith, however, the era of railroad construction had reached its peak. Texas already had more miles of track than any other state in the Union. Smith could not get enough investors to meet their commitment, leaving sections of the 18-mile stretch unfinished, so that the management of the Frisco had to put up the capital themselves, taking the stock of Smith's company in exchange. The extension to May would be completed in 1911, but the Brownwood to May line was never profitable and was abandoned in 1927. Its trackway eventually converted into the section of U.S. Highway 183 that connects the towns to this day. Bygone Brown is a co-production of the Brown County Historical Commission and Brownwood's Historic Lyric Theater. A beautifully illustrated companion guide to the series is available at Intermission Books and other locations downtown. Proceeds from the sale of the book support the Brown County Museum of History. Recorded at the elegant R.B. Rogers House and Events venue, Bygone Brown was written by Lamar Cravens, narrated by Tommy Bailey, and featured the voice talents of Dominique Glaske, Jonathan Harvey, Levi Packer, Val Nelson, Drex Holt, Jacob Bierman, Alexander Glass, Walker Willie, Graham Allen, Susie Harkey, Tracy Brandon Tucker, Allison Diaz, Aaliyah Curtis, Mackenzie Lair, Ryan Bailey, and Doug, Shannon, and Aaron Turner. To find out more about our thriving community and upcoming events, go to visitbrownwood.com.